Today, Will Simon, previously of Headspace, Big Spaceship, AllTrails, currently working with us on the Artwrld app, someone that I Slack with on a very, very regular basis, and also talk about this sort of thing, which is bridging worlds, and which is like, how do you make the digital and physical integrate and make better experiences for people that are not dopamine slot machines. So with that, Will, I will hand it off to you.
Thanks, Josh. So I'm Will. I'm a product designer. I'm in LA. And today I'm going to be talking about making apps that connect into real world experiences, which I've had the privilege of working on a few different projects, including Artwrld, which Josh is at the helm of. So that's a lot of the reason I'm here to kind of help, open up a conversation around that. I'm going to share my screen. So I think there's some few friends I know in here, but mostly people I don't know. So it's great to meet you. Like I said, I'm gonna chat a bit about making apps that kind of help connect into physical and embodied experiences. So a little bit about me. I'm a product designer based in LA. I know a lot of the group here is kind of more like experiential designers and like working in physical spaces, museums, like interactive design. So I'm more on the app side, but a lot of the projects I've really loved working on actually kind of come to life when you're not on the screen. So projects like AllTrails, Headspace, more recently Artwrld. So I've kind of dabbled in those worlds and kind of figured out how, how does the screen and the sort of the app interface, relate to these more like physical experiences that we want people to have. So yeah, we'll go into more of that in a little bit. I just want to give a little bit of background on kind of where I'm coming from. And then for the conversation, really wanted to think about like apps. And a lot of times when we think about it, we're kind of thinking about like the way these apps really try to suck our attention. And a lot of the modern discourse around technology and our phones and apps is really about the way that they are sort of compromising our mental health and kind of sucking us into the phone, to really to our own detriment. And so this photo, I think, really captures like a lot of what people, think of when they think of apps and sort of the role they have in life today. And I think a lot of this comes from like the business metrics and incentives that are in place with a lot of tech companies. So there's kind of this implicit logic around the idea that more time on the device is success. A lot of companies are built this way. Uh, so like, if you look, the things we think of, or, other social media apps, a lot of games, entertainment, they're really designed to keep our attention locked onto the screen. So using lots of like dopamine hooks and bells and whistles and social mechanics and all kinds of things, just to kind of keep you engaged as long as possible, mostly so they can sell you on some kind of subscription or sell your data or attention to advertisers or to someone else. Even I think, looking at like Duolingo as an example, even apps like that, which I think are like doing something quote good and positive in the world, I think even they should be questioned. I think a lot of them are really just trying to keep you on your phone, keep you engaged and like hooked into things as long as possible, for better or worse, even if you do end up learning like a little bit of Italian along the way. They're using a lot of these mechanics in different ways that we should, be mindful of. And I think like as much as I love like memes and I spend plenty of time on reels and like fucking around on the internet, a lot of great stuff happens out in the real world. And I think that's where this kind of tension exists in a lot of the way we design apps and products and the way we design businesses really, and how they're driving behavior. So, thinking about the types of products I've had the chance to work on, a lot of them are really trying to help you get out into the world, or into your body in different ways. So like we'll talk about a few different projects I've worked on, but this is kind of the area I wanted to explore in this conversation is like, how can apps help enable physical experiences, embodied experience, help people connect to the real world, help them connect to each other, rather than simply replacing these experiences or distracting from them. And it's obviously a spectrum and there's a lot of nuance here, but this is definitely something that, came up when we talked about Artwrld and we've talked about some other projects that I've had the chance to work on. So really like, what is the role of technology in these multi-layered experiences that involve the real world and how do those kind of interface with each other? So a little bit of background on me and kind of how I got here. I came out of the sort of like New York creative design studio world. Spent a bunch of years out of college at a company called Big Spaceship that I think some of you on the call know, which is now known as just Spaceship. Um, got kind of cut my teeth there working with like really brilliant creative people to like think about building interfaces and building websites and how these like creative layers can come to life. And I also spent some time at a few studios like Made by Many, which probably not as many people have heard of, but they're a really interesting innovation studio. And I worked with a team called Fjord, and that's where I started to learn more about like human-centered design and really thinking not just about like beautiful, fun experiences, but really how do you solve problems for people? How do you create digital products and interfaces that really create value, drive behavior, kind of thinking more like startup mentality. So I kind of did that for the first 5 or 6 years of my career, and then I moved over to LA and I started working with Headspace when that was a very nascent company, about 20 people in the studio or in the office when I joined. So I got the chance to kind of go internal and help build a product and kind of see how that worked. And then I've gone on to work with some amazing companies like AllTrails, and made a bunch of different apps over the years. Lots of early stage things, lots of things none of you have heard of, some of which you probably have. But really made sort of like my career path building apps, especially early stage 0 to 1, kind of building new things and getting those into the market. Most recently, I worked with Josh here on Artwrld, which we'll kind of spend some time talking about. This was a project that really kind of took a lot of the learnings from other projects and also brought those to like a new territory for me, which, I know a bit about the art scene, but really it was kind of new ground for me to like learn about and explore. And I'm still kind of learning more about how it operates. And it's been a lot of fun. So like one of the like kind of insights I had thinking about this was that a lot of the best digital products actually work well when you're not looking at them. And we'll kind of look like at some examples of that and how that works. But that's kind of one thing I've noticed as a pattern in some of the best products is they kind of know when to get out of the way. They kind of have an element of guiding or inspiring or helping you enter into something, and then they kind of step back and let you have the experience, and they're available to kind of step in and give you tools and resources and guidance as you need it. And you'll kind of see like some similarities across different projects that I'm gonna showcase. And I think one distinction is just kind of thinking about these like attention extracting products versus experience enabling. And I think that's where, I've tried to focus most of my efforts on products that I think are helping people have positive experiences, whether that's with themselves internally or out in the world, rather than, building apps that are purely about driving, more and more eyeballs and attention and, time in the app and, extractive from the user. So I'm gonna kind of walk through a few case studies, some of the sort of bigger projects I've had the privilege of working on, Headspace, AllTrails, and Artwrld more recently, and kind of show some themes and insights and just some like lessons learned from designing these products and being a part of these teams, and some of the kind of interesting bits, fun bits, and kind of takeaways that maybe could be applied to other projects. So I'm going to start with Headspace. If you don't know Headspace, it's a really wonderful app. It kind of started as a really small company. It was a Tibetan former Buddhist monk and kind of like a marketing creative guy came together, and they were like, how do we bring meditation to the masses? And that's exactly what they did. And it kind of has gone on to become a much larger healthcare company now. They have therapy and they have all sorts of resources, but it kind of started as this pretty interesting moment in culture where they kind of brought meditation and made it accessible um, at that point in time. I joined about 2015. This is a photo of our design team that we built over the kind of 2 or 3 years I was there. Really amazing team, wonderful people, all kind of came together, mission driven. That's me standing up on the right. And we were able to like really kind of take this seed of an idea and really help scale it into something that was really accessible and impactful. What's interesting about Headspace is that like meditation by definition is an off-screen activity. And so this was like kind of the tension that existed by default with the company, and even like within the sort of organization and the leadership team, there's a lot of kind of questions of like, can you really bring meditation to an app? Does it still work? Like, do you like at that, and now it seems very commonplace and we're like, of course you can listen to meditation and do yoga on your app and all that. But at the time it was actually kind of controversial in the meditation community. And then there was also a lot of stigma out in the world about meditation being this kind of hippie spiritual woo-woo thing. So there was a lot of questions around like, how do you actually make this experience work on a phone, and how do you sort of leverage that in a way that can sort of drive the right experience and not just like kind of become a slippery slope into another dopaminergic, app where you're trying to like play some kind of game that's mindfulness themed or something, which was kind of always a tension we had to be careful of. I think a few things worked really well at Headspace. I think first was just the brand was incredible. Like it was warm, it was inviting, it was really approachable, and that inspired people to kind of like come in to even consider it or try it and to like kind of take the next step with it. A lot of that extended from the creative director Anna Charity and the founder Andy, who was kind of the voice of Headspace and really embodying their kind of warm, playful energy. And what it did was it kind of disarmed a lot of people and it transformed this kind of taboo into something that was kind of like fun and creative and relatable. So that was kind of the entry point. And then on the app side, we really designed it to be kind of intentionally minimal so you could leave the world behind and kind of go inward. So we had just enough of the app to kind of pull you in, keep you engaged, but then it would sort of like step to the backstage. We used a lot of interaction design to kind of evoke calmness and breathing and like slow pacing, a lot of things to relax your nervous system and help it kind of feel like a space you could go to that felt calming, relaxing, enjoyable to be in. And we kind of over time learned to kind of balance that with the more sort of you could say like bouncy elements that maybe made you feel like you're making progress or kind of celebratory and kind of had some energy to them. So it was a lot of interesting creative work on the team there and a lot of really talented illustrators involved and animators and people that kind of really paid attention to details to kind of bring these almost like bringing elements of the physical world into the app so it felt like a space you were in. So like, thinking about like the way apps relate to the physical world, one sort of frame that we talked about quite often at Headspace was like the app is like an invisible guide. And so I like to go a lot to like movies and mythology and stuff. So like one of the references that came up a lot was like Obi-Wan or Yoda in Star Wars, this idea of this kind of like wise, friendly companion that was there to teach you, give you the skills, but then knew kind of how to step back and eventually kind of became almost an invisible guide that would show up as a voice in your ear to kind of help remind you to be present, right? And that was really kind of for me a bit of a like spiritual guide around the sort of the spirit of the product and kind of what it was meant to do over time. I'm also a huge Star Wars fan, so I just had to get that in there. But I think it just kind of helps, frame like what is the role of this in the experience. And that was one of the big principles I wanted to talk about was I think when you're looking at like a larger physical experience, it's really important to understand the role of an app or a piece of technology in that. It's very easy to get carried away. There's totally a like, possibility space in the quantum realm where Headspace could have become a Duolingo for mindfulness, where you're in the app playing with, cartoon games all day, and it's kind of feels like you're doing something good for your brain, but it's actually just like a video game flavored with mindfulness. And so there was always kind of a lot of restraint and having to kind of come back to like what really is the purpose of this and how does the app serve this embodied experience. So I think that's something that, the company's always wrestled with, but they've done a really great job of continuing to kind of stay the course with that and really I think it says a lot about the authenticity of the team and the sort of roots coming actually from a lineage of meditation and mindfulness, and then they've sort of built that further out with science and a lot of other pieces around it. So for Headspace, what was interesting is I think the app was really about motivation. So we built a lot of scaffolding to kind of create motivation and help people stay engaged in their meditation journey. So that was like the run streak was kind of a new idea at the time, different ideas of milestones, showing your progress through different sort of courses or topics, using all these elements to kind of bring people back. There were a number of people who had like 500-day run streaks in Headspace and like thousands and thousands of minutes meditated. And so we kind of use those behavioral science techniques to keep people coming back and sitting down and pressing play. But then once you press play, it was kind of like, hey, out of sight, out of mind, the phone should just be set aside and then like let things happen between your ears. So we often talked about sort of like these different layers, I guess you could say, of guidance. And so you have like the digital guidance that was happening in the app, and that was helping you find like the right meditation or help you kind of establish a goal or feel like you're making progress. And then that would kind of lead you into this more embodied guidance, which is really the audio content. And that was more guiding you through what to do internally and with your body And those kind of had a nice interplay where, the more you do one, it leads to the other, and then it would lead you back into the other realm. And it kind of created this virtuous cycle where, people were deepening their practice and kind of going from sort of a uphill battle to building like a more of a habit and then a practice that they like didn't want to live without. So this kind of, I think to look at that again is kind of like the digital guidance side was the app sort of setting the stage and guiding you through what to do. And then the actual experience was more embodied, just like put your phone away, put your headphones in, listen, go into your body and go from there. So one like principle, I wanted to share was kind of this idea that like how an interface disappears is just as important as how it appears. And I think when we get into things like AllTrails, there's a lot of that as well. Like knowing when like the app is just needs to be put away, but it's there if you need it, is really important, especially when you want people to have a really deep experience, whether that's internally in their body, in their mind, or like out in nature or elsewhere. I wanted to throw this in. I had nothing to do with this, but the team while I was there was working on these experimental pods as well. And so this was an attempt at creating a way to experience meditation out in the wild without an app and in a way that felt sort of modern and sort of embodied this like feeling of it. So these were actual pods that they deployed around like airports and public spaces as a way to like, mostly as a way to promote Headspace, but kind of as an experiential campaign. And so you would sit in there and then it would guide you through a meditation, and it kind of created this like, how do we call it, like kind of like you're like in a little womb or incubator, and it's like, you're listening to the experience, you have a meditation, and then you can kind of step out. So this was kind of a fun, attempt, I think, again, at like, how do you create this experience in the physical world that then also takes you internal, but is guided by technology and audio. And so, those were kind of the questions we were thinking about solving. We also spent a lot of time talking to like at the time, the Amazon, like I think it was the Amazon, was it Alexa or Echo? We were talking to their team about like, how do you use those types of technologies to use voice? Because ultimately, like, besides the motivation layer, like Headspace didn't really need a screen. So we're like, okay, can we tap into speakers and other things and have you sort of just like throughout your day, you're on your way to a meeting in your car, and then Alexa could know to do a 5-minute meditation to help you calm down. So we did a lot of that sort of like sci-fi AI voice exploration at the time. And those were always that's kind of always where we saw Headspace going. One of the head guys there always talked about her as a reference. He was like really obsessed with her in a way that was like a little dystopian, but definitely kind of set the stage for like, hey, we're really going toward this like voice companion future that we're all living in now. So really interesting to see all that play out. One thing I just wanted to mention too was Sleep by Headspace. And so this was a project I led the research on this and kind of the discovery and the first design of the initial product experience. And this is a really interesting one because we were designing for this really unique use case, which was basically we saw like a lot of people sort of hacking Headspace to go to bed at night. Like a lot of people were going to Headspace, going to meditations and using it to put them to sleep, which was like great, not the intended use, but totally, valid. So we started to see a lot of signal around this, and it made a lot of sense for the company to go after it because, you could use audio content. It kind of, it lended itself to our strengths as a team to develop content and an experience to help you with sleep. So we really dove into that and spent a lot of time actually like learning about people's sleep habits and what's happening in the bedroom at night when they can't fall asleep, and like how they relate with their phone then, which is there's even more tension then because you really shouldn't be on your phone at night. So how do you like create something to support in that moment? And we eventually developed our first version of the product, which had like really wonderful content that was really like research driven and refined with people, that we like had them test content night after night, and they would give us feedback each morning and we would refine the content. And we got a lot of like great principles out of it, like really ambient, soothing sounds. We had like sleep stories, and they had to be like engaging enough to get your attention, but kind of boring still. So you like wouldn't actually stay up to listen to the end of it. And we had them sort of like familiar, but then they would bring in new elements. So they kind of like randomized the story. So it didn't get you didn't know what to expect because you would listen to the same one night after night to help you sleep. And then people could dial up and down the audio if they wanted more background noise or more voice. It's very, very sensitive state when you're sleeping. Like even someone like clicking their mouth or like, a little bit of a, sound from someone talking can like wake you back up. So it's very, very sensitive to fine tune the experience. So I think it was really helpful to like design the app experience with real people in the real lived experience of like trying to go to bed at night and understanding, even like the issues with putting headphones in because they sleep with a partner, but then they aren't comfortable with the headphones, and all these kind of little nuances that if you're just like on Figma by yourself, you don't really think about. And then we designed the actual visual experience, really thinking about nighttime conditions. So, really like low light, purple, blue colors, really big chunky buttons. The initial version actually, which this isn't showing here, was like big chunky buttons. So you could sort of like be squinting with one eye open and tap them. And just really designing it for like a late night, like low light situation where you don't want to be like opening your phone, looking at a bright screen, and you just can tap something and try to get back to sleep. So really just thinking about like how do you design for a state of being, not just a task. It's like what mode is someone in? What's their experiential environment, and how do you design for that sort of physiological mode, or sort of the way their consciousness is in that moment, not just sort of what are they trying to do and how do you organize around that. So really fun project. Jumping to AllTrails now. So AllTrails, I spent a couple years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years working with the team there. Incredibly talented team. I think one of the designers is on the call here. So shout out. I was one of many people working on this project. Amazing app. I'm sure a lot of you guys know. And really what they've done is really take, the whole world outside all these trails and bring them into a platform where you can actually discover trails, find somewhere to go, and then when you're outside on the trail, actually navigate it. So it kind of really extends into the physical world, giving you a companion so you can get outside, hike, trail run, explore national parks, all of this stuff. Very sophisticated product, and a lot of design love and craft goes into it behind the scenes. And AllTrails, ultimately is about like being outside. And I think one of the interesting tensions is like, we try to get people outside with AllTrails. It's really great for discovery. And then once they're out there, there's this kind of tension where people just want to be off their phones for a good reason. That's kind of the whole point. And so there's always this tension of like, are we trying to keep them on their phone with AllTrails while they're on the trail? Are we not? Like, how are we helping? And I think it actually is a really strong net positive for helping them immerse deeper into nature. And I'll kind of explain why when we get there. But I see it as like kind of like in this case, the app is more like a gateway to the real world. It's kind of helping you see the physical world in a way you couldn't otherwise, and then access it. Without something like this, there's no way to sort of make sense of all these trails. You would have no idea they really exist, or you'd have to scour the internet and use a lot of dated maps and, you know, track things down manually. AllTrails typically kind of you could think about it in these like three layers. I would say like discovery, which is about like finding trails and then like exploring what's out there. Navigation, which is actually the companion tool on the trail to help you sort of navigate and understand the terrain. And then this kind of like more expansion connection layer, which I think is where the company is starting to get into. And I did some work kind of helping explore some of those ideas. So discovery is really kind of, I think, what most people know AllTrails for, which is like this gateway into the outdoors, helping you find trails, kind of know what to expect and feel safe and prepared. And so it's really just this like beautiful, thoughtful way of kind of seeing all the trails that are out there, national parks. The team's done some really innovative stuff here. So like on the left here, they do like 3D flyovers. So you can actually see like a preview of a trail and see like the 3D map of what it's going to be like to actually like go on that trail. In the middle here, one of the designers, Andrew, did this really innovative photo gallery where you can kind of scrub through the trail and then see all the photos, stamped along it. So you really kind of get close to simulating it. And then you have, a lot of just great, rich information. They're starting to use AI now to distill that and show like summaries of reviews and kind of help people understand what to expect. Also, some really nice stuff with like conditions and weather. So really, it's like everything you could possibly need to understand like what to expect when I go on this trail and what is it going to look and feel like. Really like wonderful way of just allowing for discovery. And then navigation, I would say, is where the product like really comes to life. And not everyone kind of uses this. A lot of people are more in the discovery layer. But when you go out trail, AllTrails has like a navigation tool. So if you're on a specific trail, you can kind of track along. It kind of keeps you on trail, keeps you safe, can alert you if you've taken a wrong turn, and also, of course, like tracks your metrics and how far you've gone and all of those things. But it really becomes this companion. This I think is like really a really interesting layer to it, and it's really I think what allows you to actually feel more immersed in nature. Like one insight I had I think when I first started working with AllTrails, I kind of thought, oh, you're like out in nature and you're on your phone using this gadget. But really what happens is people feel less likely to get lost. They feel more confident. And so they actually are going to go out in nature and explore places that they otherwise wouldn't. And they also feel very safe to turn off everything else on their phone. So they tend to just shut everything off, use the offline maps, navigate freely, and have this actually really deep, immersive experience in nature. So kind of, this principle that like the right tech can help you actually become more immersed in the physical world because it creates safety and guidance and gives you sort of a scaffolding from which to be like, hey, I can just fully drop in and whatever that is, without having to sort of constantly check your phone or kind of like feel like you're at the limitations of something. So really kind of helps people go deeper. And then the third layer is kind of this connection layer, which is really starting to explore tools that draw you deeper into nature and enrich your experience with nature. One of these that the team just launched recently was plant identification. So this is really, a tool while you're out, not only helping you navigate, but it actually helps you kind of connect into nature, learn about it. You can scan a plant and it'll like, identify what that is and kind of create this experience to help you sort of enrich your understanding of nature and have like a deeper experience than you could have without it. So that's a really exciting sort of next step the team has been taking. We also explored a lot of sort of like more augmented navigation, you could say. So helping people actually like maybe use their phone to look around and see nearby mountain peaks, or like if someone reported a downed tree, you would see that like, oh, coming up ahead, there's something I should be aware of. So really helping, think about how can the interface overlay on the world in a way that is still helpful with, without taking away anything, really just giving you more information so you can sort of, enrich your experience outdoors. And then we also thought about, how to like trail recordings, photos, reviews, all this content that you actually gather in that experience. How can you sort of translate that back into the digital world, into lasting kind of memories and artifacts? So did a lot of work around this concept of capturing your experiences. So if you track a hike, how does that show up on like a map where you can see all the places you've been or the people you've been with over time, and sort of relive that with 3D maps showing the trail you did. So again, it's kind of completing this full circle loop of coming back from the real world back into the app and then motivating you to get out there again. So a lot of ideas we've explored there. And I'm going to be mindful of time. I'm going to keep moving. Artwrld is the next one I want to talk about. Josh's favorite. So for those who don't know, Artwrld is a new app. We just launched the first version. It's currently live in LA and New York. And really what this is to help you discover the art world. Pretty straightforward, but took a lot of work to kind of figure out how to make it actually happen. So like I actually didn't know that much about the art space. Like I go to the occasional gallery show or exhibition, or when I'm traveling, I'll see some really cool art somewhere, but I never really got into like the sort of nuances and depth of it. And one thing I found coming into this was that the art world is very like hard to navigate. There's a lot of stuff distributed and scattered. It's really hard to know like what's happening in a city, what are the right shows to see, what's interesting. It's all kind of scattered and obscured, I think, in a way that almost has like a gatekeeping feel. Like a lot of art people don't want it to be like that visible because that's what makes it feel special. But what ends up happening is people just can't access it. And a lot of things, amazing shows are happening and artists are out there, and you just have no way of encountering it unless it happens to like stumble across your path. So this is kind of like the current stage of the world. And so like Artwrld is really an attempt to sort of centralize a lot of that information, a lot of the material, a lot of the people and shows and all of that into a space where, people can step out into New York or LA and find great shows, and eventually other cities as well, and sort of go deeper with the art world, understand why they might want to see a show or who they might want to connect with, and go from there. So I see art world as kind of this like bridge to culture and community. It's definitely helping you explore the physical spaces, but it's also really about this like culture and like the things happening in these spaces, and like why people are going to this opening at 7 o'clock on Thursday, and why this artist is significant, and kind of the social energy around it. So a lot of it's like making the invisible visible. So a lot of stuff is happening in the art scene. It's really hard to even see it's out there unless you're really plugged in. The team there's an amazing person on the team, Alex, who's like incredibly plugged into the art scene, and she's like has this like web of intelligence that she's pulled in. So there's a lot of just actual like pounding the pavement, really knowing the people, the players, the galleries, and consolidating that that's really what the team's been doing. It's not a lot of like AI out there scouring and like consolidating. It's like real people in the art scene taking this information and making it available, making it visible. We did a ton of exploration. I don't even want to know how many rounds of designs we've explored and concepts we've played with. But we landed on kind of, starting off really with discovery, helping you come into the app, understand a little bit about who you are, like where you are, what you're into, and then using some existing mental models around like maps and lists and things to help you understand what's going on in your city. Um, Bringing in a bit of like this kind of like editorial perspective to help people, not just have access to all the information, but really know like why they might want to see certain things or what's happening in their area this week or this weekend that's worth seeing. So helping give that opinionated perspective and guidance as well. Just really kind of starting to get more curatorial with it and kind of have an opinion about, what's happening in the art scene, what to share, what to go look at. A lot of things we've explored around helping you find things. So, getting into more like itinerary building or understanding, are you going somewhere this weekend and what neighborhoods you're going to be in? Let's help you sort of populate the things that you might want to check out. And having like tours potentially. These are ideas we've been exploring. Like, how do you sort of guide people beyond just gathering all the information in one place? Like, really make it meaningful and personal for them to, find the stuff that resonates with them. Um, you know, a lot of expected features like saving to lists, things like that we built into the first version. But one of the big insights I had was that the art world is really not just about art. In fact, I would say it's more about the people than the art. And that was like a huge unlock for me. I thought it was just about going and seeing like things that look cool in galleries. But really, when I talked to Josh and a few of the other kind of key players who were really plugged in, I realized it's kind of this whole social graph with like interesting events and people and collectors and there's a lot of like layers to it, and it's really a social experience more than anything else. And so I think that's really what we want to start to tap into as we evolve the product further, is not just sort of, hey, how do we like make all the information available in one place, but really how do we start to bring to life this like social community, like cultural layer of art world, so or of the art world. So going from discovery, I think the next sort of piece is really playing with the social layer. So we're exploring more editorial ways to tell artist stories and go deeper on like the why behind the artwork and the story around it and the context. um, Looking into events and like really bringing to life the like opening events, who's going, if you want to go something, making it feel a little more alive and like there's people in this space, and understanding who's going where, or being able to even like follow people that are going to shows you think are interesting, and kind of layering that social piece in. And then also the artist side, like bringing the artist to the front stage. I think that's something that often is kind of a footnote, when actually it's one of the more compelling ways to start to understand art and different shows that are happening, is to really understand the art and the context behind, or sorry, the artists and the context behind the work that they do. And then, we've explored ideas around how do you bring the art world actually back into the app as well, like content, videos, talks, like clips that are more alive, like stuff around the art, like the conversations, not just, photos of the shows and, go check it out in person, but actually helping you understand sort of the narratives and the sort of cultural context around it. And then, the future stuff is thinking more about that experiential layer and how we like, how do we create deeper experiences as people go out in the art world. And so these are all sort of speculative ideas, but we've been exploring like itinerary building using AI to kind of know what you like and when and where you're going. We can create custom itineraries for like a weekend tour in Chelsea, Manhattan. Playing with like generative audio guides. So it could be, take information we have about artists and their shows and actually create like art, audio guides you can listen to kind of understand more about them, whether you're at the show or you may be on your way there and you want to just kind of get an understanding of them. And then also playing with this kind of like identification idea of like, can you take, pictures of art, kind of learn more about them using some things like that. So these are all kind of ideas we've kind of just played with and we're exploring for the future potentially. But you can see there's a lot of ways we could take this. um, and yeah, so just getting started. Like I said, we just got the first version out there, so we're just very early and like really looking for feedback. And anyone who wants to try it and wants to reach out with ideas, we are all ears. I'm sure Josh can talk more about that. And that's it. That's all I got. So thank you for letting me talk. Um, I know it was a lot, but it was really fun to share all that. And if, yeah, I got my website here. If anyone wants to reach out or connect or shoot me a DM, all my links are there. And yeah, it's been great to share some of this stuff. A lot of fun putting this together.
All right. Well, I love it. I love it. It's also, it's like I've made so many Artwrld decks and yours are so much better. I don't know why I just didn't fucking delegate to you in the first place. It's very good stuff. Good stuff. So if you have questions for Will, just go camera on and ask him. I obviously this is a super, super fun conversation to have. So, okay, I'll
Hey,
jump
well,
in. Oh no, go on, go on. I'm sorry, Matt, go for it.
hi. Yeah, this is Matt Neutron. I worked on Bose frames and audio augmented reality for about 5 years, and I love hearing your your pitch for um, phone down experiences. Can you talk about the the way that you design the interface to prepare for those moment of phone down experiences? So when someone's phone's down and there's an audio thing going on, how do you cue them to bring the phone back up to get visual information, then go back to the phone down part of the experience? I'll mute and wait for your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the sort of like obvious no-brainer is using a lot of like bells and whistles, notifications, like sound effects, vibration, those kinds of things. So like, I'm trying to think of examples. Headspace was a little more like it's a little unique because the content itself was the experience. So baked into that were cues to kind of like open your eyes, come back, sound effects that like the session has ended. And usually by the time someone like goes back to their phone, they've just arrived on the completion screen. AllTrails was a little bit more nuanced where, you're actually having more of an interplay between um, the phone and the person putting it away and kind of bringing it back out. So I think there was a lot of, notifying people, vibration, sound effects to notify like, hey, you made a wrong turn, or you might want to like check in on something. And then otherwise it was kind of just encouraging them visually to like put their phone away unless they needed the map to navigate. So I think it's a good question. I think I would say probably relying on like the system elements has been what I've seen work best. Um, but it's a great question. I don't have like a perfect answer, but yeah, I think it's just like using the right little tools and bells and whistles to kind of trigger
Yeah.
things.
No,
All right.
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm working on an app called Immersphere that is an AR app, and the goal of the AR app is to use audio as the navigation portion of it. And when you get to the locations where there are visual things, you get an audio cue to pick your phone up and scan the ground and have holograms show up in those spaces.
Nice.
Totally.
So yeah, Will and I have talked about this. Audio is augmented reality. It's a very,
You're talking my
doesn't
language.
just have to be. We're gonna go Ryan, Justin, Rachel. Take it across. Ryan, you're first.
Hey, Will. Nice to meet you. Whenever I hear people work talking about, trying to balance between two sort of tensions, and in this case, it was this idea of you need to drive some engagement to get people into the app to engage with the product, but then you need this restraint of attention. My first question is just the interesting one of, was there a mistake you made at some point where it kind of went off the rails and you had to peel it back and you're like, oh no, this is not quite right, or it's really having the unintended. We misfired here.
It's a great question. Let me think for a second. I think what comes to mind is I think Headspace had that tension most of all. Um, Primarily because of its like business model, right? It was mostly monthly subscriptions. So there's like definitely pressure to like keep people coming back and renewing and like staying engaged. So there was a lot of pressure on engagement. What we tried to do is tie that metric as close as we could to the right behavior, which was like sitting down and meditating. Um, I think a good example might be we tested a feature to like at the beginning of Headspace, it was actually quite controversial to do a 10-minute meditation. That was like the founder Andy was like, hey, we like that's like wild first of all, having them do it on a phone, and then only for 10 minutes, that's like not enough to even scratch the surface. It's kind of like a placebo at that point. We at one point tested a 3-minute and a 1-minute meditation. And so we tried to kind of like see like, okay, does that have the same efficacy? Can you bring people back to the product? Just have them check in for 1 minute, or do like a visual meditation or other kind of exercises. And so I think that was where we started to like lose the plot a little bit on like the why. And so, in an effort to chase daily active usage, we were diluting the actual sort of active ingredient of the thing. And I think that's when we had to we kind of quickly walked that back. Like we tested the waters and we're like, yeah, this isn't feeling right. It's not really working from a product perspective or from a sort of an efficacy perspective. And we had to walk it back. But I think that was like, again, I think a lot of it comes down to sort of like how they design, how the team has designed their like success metrics. And, if you're saying like, hey, we want people like meditating consistently, that's a very different goal than saying we want them to open the Headspace app every day, right? Like you'll have a lot of different tools depending on which of those goals you're going after. So I think that's what I come back to is like, what are the incentives you're really designing around? And then that's where the tensions usually come from. If those aren't like, if that's not in alignment,
Yeah. Was it just that they were too frenetic, like it was too short attention span, and it felt like it was distracting more than it was helping?
Yeah, I think it was kind of, yeah, it was like a distracting from the actual like core purpose of the product. And then you had people using it in a way that actually wasn't really long-term sustainable or like leading to the outcomes that would actually retain people. So kind of like, yeah, I think it was just undermining sort of the core premise as opposed to like, how do we provide ways to deepen and further motivate people to do this core thing? And the company has since expanded a ton, and they have a lot of different like modalities and things you can do in the app. I was there during sort of the main meditation era, you could say. Now it's a much broader like health and wellness tool. So I'm sure they've explored a bunch of different other, things along the way.
All right. Okay, I actually missed Jerome because the contrast of his raised hand. I was just going to throw something in really quickly, which is like a lot of the mechanics associate to the business model. So if your business model is subscription, like then you can kind of serve there's a pretty easy transaction that happens there. But if you're Instagram and it's like really about like advertising and retention, and like how long can you keep people in this thing and like expose them to messages, then you have a completely different mechanic. And one of the reasons I think actually Artwrld opened up as an opportunity was that Instagram used to serve artists very well, but their business model isn't aligned to the artist's actual needs, or the gallery's needs or anything else. It's like very, very pay to play. It's very much about, like promoting content. So yeah, it's like they're gonna throw clickbait, scared tactic shit at you.
Yeah, and I'll say I've also seen, just personally, anecdotally, seen a lot of apps and companies shifting to annual memberships and member-based models, as opposed to like there's an era of monthly and weekly subscriptions where you're constantly just trying to keep people from churning. And so
Yeah.
you end up really kind of chasing these short-term gains, as opposed to like, how do we create enough value where someone wants to just like buy a year membership and be a part of this? I think that's a much healthier model. And so I'm encouraged by that for sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna let other people talk about this. We could talk forever. Jerome, your question.
Um, Will, thanks. Three amazing products. I'm on Artwrld right now because I'm in New York and LA a lot. I need this so badly that I'm so excited. I just have to ask a question about that Headspace cubicle. Is that odd space that was kind of to the user's right when you're sitting in it for a rollaway?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I'm trying to remember the way they designed it. It was almost like some kind of like sound wave based. They kind of carved these layers into the wood, and it kind of created a pretty comfortable seating environment, but I think some of it was more aesthetic. I can try and find some. I think there's a few articles about the designers who worked on it, some like more industrial designers. Pretty interesting product though, like trying to really create a physical embodiment, you could say, of the meditation experience.
All right, Justin, your question.
Hey, so out of curiosity, I'm sure when you're working with these products and like building and designing things, you're working with product owners and marketing teams and things along those lines who have individual metrics that they need to meet and probably want more engagement and higher levels of just eyeballs in their portions of the app. So how do you kind of either balance that or, tell them, hey, like, no, we can't do that because the goal of this is to actually get people off the screen. Like, how do you push back against those kinds of stakeholders?
The honest answer is I work with really early stage companies where none of that happens. That said, yeah, Headspace, AllTrails are both pretty big companies with a bunch of teams with different sort of metrics and KPIs. It's interesting. There's definitely, I mean, there were definitely tensions at Headspace where you had people that were driving at the core sort of behavior, but then you had a lot of teams driving at like, hey, how do we increase X, Y, or Z because it's aligned to our sort of business unit, you could say. I think those usually in my experience have ended up being conversations about, they usually come down to either resourcing and like fighting over like whose metric is actually the business metric, and kind of getting aligned on like what really is the core thing. I think AllTrails did a great job of this. The chief product officer there was always, he kind of had his hands in a lot of the design work, and he was able to sort of understand how all these different projects were rolling up into like pushing the business forward. So I don't know. I don't have a perfect answer for you. It depends a lot on the team and the situation. It's a lot of like negotiations and like sort of, ultimately I think it's always been coming back to like the why and like what is our purpose here. And then a lot of compromise. I wish I had a better answer, but there's definitely tensions that exist there where, it's different metrics. But if the team has done a good job, they should all ladder up in a way. I think that's why so many teams spend so much time on their like OKRs and goals, so that doesn't happen, that fragmentation doesn't happen.
All right, I'm gonna throw something very quick, and then we're gonna get to Rachel and Chris. This might run a little bit over. The only thing I was gonna say though is like a lot of that also has to do with how you raise money, because that's actually something I'm also looking at right now, with Artwrld, which is like if you raise venture capital, which like Headspace did at a very high valuation, you need to hit like a very, very high target for revenue, which might not be possible with a subscription model. So they've moved into like healthcare and B2C stuff, or B2B stuff, because they just raised so much money, like their model wouldn't support an exit at where they needed it to be. Sorry. Anywho, Rachel, you can ask your question. Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. This was really cool. And I live in New York, so I'm looking forward to trying out Artwrld. Two questions, one of which is, at least for me, I've found that with AllTrails, that having finally gotten in and getting an Apple Watch, I find it much easier to sort of pull my attention out of the screen and feel more confident stowing the phone away and using it with that. I was wondering, sort of, are these types of apps, or how you guys are currently approaching it right now, Artwrld, is it at the point that you can sort of think of the watch as an integral part of the experience early on for many users, or is it not at that point yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to invite Kyle, if you're listening, the designer who did AllTrails Apple Watch app. If you want to chime in, by all means, would love for you to hop in. I think it's an interesting one. I mean, I was surprised, like Apple Watch saturation is very high. Like I had no idea how many people had Apple Watches. It was kind of shocking. So Kyle's in the audience. I don't know if he's listening right now, but he did the design for that for AllTrails. So I was kind of like watching over his shoulder, learning kind of from his work about that. And I think it's definitely interesting. We've talked about AllTrails doing like navigation, especially a big behavior is people moving from one show to another. And sort of this idea of like being at a show and sort of wanting to know what else they should explore within a neighborhood. So there's definitely like navigational bits. There's sort of the contextual information. I'm curious what you think, Josh. I personally don't feel like it's priority or makes a lot of sense at this stage.
We have to ask our developer how long it takes to implement. Really, Kyle is actually camera on and audio on. So Kyle, do you want to jump in and share?
Sure. I mean, I didn't expect to chime in on this call at all. I was just going to lurk in the
Oh,
background,
sorry.
Will. No, it's totally cool. But I appreciate the invitation to do so, Will. But yeah, like for AllTrails, the Apple Watch makes a ton of sense because again, we're trying to get people like kind of off of their phone, especially when they're outdoors. And so like having the ability to sort of glance down at your wrist and sort of confirm, you know, where you are in relationship to the route that you're on, you know, how much time you're taking if you're kind of recording your activity, are things that are, you know, top of mind for people as they're outside, but aren't necessarily going to detract from their experience, you know, in nature. And, you know, specifically like the Apple Watch is kind of intended to be a sort of glanceable experience, you know, given that the screen real estate is so small. You know, people or users aren't typically like, you know, spending a ton of time like interacting with the device itself. So it's kind of a different interaction paradigm than when you're using a phone, when, you know, you could spend, you know, potentially hours like on your phone. Like the watch is really designed to kind of provide users with the information they're looking for at a glance in the moment that they're looking for it. And so like when we were approaching the watch design for AllTrails, it was kind of like, what information do people want at these specific moments in their journey, whether that be like on trail or if they're kind of like trying to find a trail like in their neighborhood or something like that. So that's kind of how we thought about it. Yeah.
I love it. It's so funny. Before she asked the question, I have an Apple Watch. I use it all the time. I didn't have it in the roadmap. Like now I totally want to do it. I think it's a great idea. Completely selfishly, maybe. We'll ask the dev how long it'll take. Chris, I'll let you have the last question.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've got a new setup here, so it's a little bit, yeah. One thing on the app, I just was amazed. I just got an email about a couple of weeks ago from Kaleido, and they're sunsetting Kaleido, and they were an amazing app that was using AI. It was an online sales platform. So that's a good case study for you to look at. They had 27,000 artists on their platform across 170 countries. And so they couldn't get the business model to work. And so they probably had outside investors, like you were saying, exactly like you were saying. So good point. All right, the question I have for Will is, what I was challenged with, we worked about 4 years and it's still out there on an app called Particle. And it's an art app. So I've explored every avenue you can imagine. Especially what I discovered it afterwards. One of the concepts we had was parasocial. It's called Parasocial by Ben Davis. He's one of the art critics over in the US. And it's kind of learning about art through the artist's eyes. But one of the major challenges we had was that an app in general isn't immersive, right? It's an app, it's in your pocket, it's a small screen. So the insights you provided from Headspace were really interesting. But if I go a stretch towards the future and looking more like at the Apple Watch, a world full of sensors, do you think, or when do you think, or how have you thought about this? Might we gain, let's say, bodied experience, right? So embodied sensors, facial expressions, things that are going on in the world around us, and how might that direct the app in some way? Have you actually had some brainstorming? This is kind of a little bit out there, so it's a little bit future space. But have you thought about how the embodied experience outside of your, right, you using the app could drive the app experience?
You're talking about
have you ever had any kind
of specifically?
Yeah, the different sensors in your environment that can actually drive. So geofencing, of course. I mean, these are the quick wins. Would of course be these, but more sophisticated expressions, interactions, tone of voice. You know, because you're gonna have sentiment analysis around you as well with AI, right? So,
yeah,
what are your thoughts?
Definitely above my pay grade.
Big question.
Yeah.
That's what I do at my other company. That's a Blue Cadet. That's their problem.
Yeah, I think Josh can speak to that with, you know, I think a lot of people in the room here probably know that world. You know, I'm more of the screen side, but yeah, I don't know, Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I think one of the things I'm very interested in is the visitor journey. Like how do you move people from digital to physical? I'm actually very interested in when people are in the physical, that they're engaging deeply with the work and with other people and not with screens. I think actually at that point, the screen should get the fuck out of the way. And I also think that like there's actually, so Artwrld start 1.0 was an art NFT platform. And I actually think there's like some stuff, if you go to one.artworld.com, you can still see it. And like, it was great. We were acquired by SF MoMA, the Guggenheim, Pompidou, were the cover of Art America magazine. It was very legit good stuff. But I actually think the very, very early days of NFTs, where it was about tokenizing for experience and POAPs, which are proof of participation, I think that could have some application where I would love to give someone a digital object for just going to a show, proving that they were there, give each gallery like 50 digital things that they can collect. And like these things should be like cheap and just be like collectibles and fun, like the way I used to like collect concert tickets at shows, rather than like, $100,000 social assets. Okay, okay, Dar, I'm gonna let you have the last question, and then Will, I'm gonna give it to you to sign it off.
I appreciate that. And I was debating whether to raise my hand, but then Josh, you kind of like introduced a question that I started to write down. Given that, the gallery experience, the art experience is in a lot of ways, it is a social experience. It feels like right now, Artwrld is still very much about the individual's ability to navigate. I'm curious, what are some of the ideas or just sort of the future planning? I know, Josh, you'd mentioned in the chat, a potential ambassador program in the future. Are you thinking about, ways in which either these ambassadors or other people are curating their own types of itineraries, or maybe having them record their own sort of like walkthroughs of the galleries in ways to kind of like bridge some more of that individual to communal aspect of the art?
You want to take that? I can take that. We've talked a lot about that specific idea, especially around itineraries and like how do you create a platform that invites people who have a lot of expertise or a lot of passion about art, and help them show up on the platform. I think there's a lot of layers. There's simple things, just even letting those people exist on the platform, follow each other, and like publish things or sort of organize things. And then, the itinerary idea is really interesting to us. We've talked about even, theoretically spinning up like Artwrld tours of, people can actually go in person and join. And that's like a great way to get people using the app as well. But definitely, I mean, that was, like I said, was a big unlock for me. It was like, this has way more to do with people than it does like pictures. And so that's, I think, a really interesting territory just to understand like how do you allow this space to exist that can tap into the social dynamics in a way that's like authentic to the art space as well. I don't know, Josh, you have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, so one of the things we're doing is we're like constantly iterating and testing and trying things. So like this is something that like we're just going to keep evolving. We're going to try things. We're gonna probably fail to roll back things. But like I think the overall idea is like it's not that dissimilar from like Artwrld in a lot of in AllTrails in a lot, because like the woods is fucking scary, and the Artwrld, if you don't feel part of it, like you feel it like feels intimidating, but it is actually very awesome and wonderful if once you get in there. So it's like, okay, how do you get people to feel comfortable? How do you feel, and then like how do you like level them up so that they're like, yeah, like I feel great, I'll do it. And then I think also, a big part of it for me is like, I think I've worked with a lot of the gatekeepers, like my agency has worked with a lot of the gatekeepers. I think artists are more interesting than galleries, auction houses, and museums even. And I think once you sort of disintermediate and like allow people to connect directly with the artist and be like, oh, like I see this person, I get their intent, like this is a human puzzling out some really interesting stuff. Like I think that's where it gets really great, Sorry, but it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna give a quick thing, which is like, download the app, tell us what we're missing. Like, just like if you're like, oh, you talked about it, I thought it'd be awesome and it didn't work at all, let us know. That's wonderful. But Will, I'll let you sign it out from here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to add, but thank you all for joining and giving me a little bit of your time and listening to me ramble a little bit. And yeah, I love working on this stuff. It's fun to get to reflect a bit and share some of my little learnings and part of my journey. So thanks for being here. Feel free to reach out if anyone wants to chat or, get in touch about anything. I'm around. And yeah, check out Artwrld.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for this cross promotional episode. So we'll be rolling out new cities too. If you want in your city, let me know. Just reach out to Josh at Artwrld, Josh at Blue Cadet. If you work at Blue Cadet, just hit me up on Slack. All right. Talk to you guys. See you, Will. Great to see everybody.